Bye.
Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry to interrupt you all as you are so initiating introductions. We have over 100 people registered for today's online forum. We're on a super tight time frame, so I'm actually going to get started in the hope that all of our presenters, and I can see a few of them, are going to be ready to go. So first up, thank you all so much for taking the time to meet with us today. In terms of, well, I would first just like to start by acknowledging my privilege to live, work and raise a family on Whadjuk Noongar land. And I'd like to pay respect to our elders, past, present, and also extend that respect to any Aboriginal people that we have here today, and also, of course, recognise the many lands in which we work across in WA. In terms of etiquette, I just want to do a reminder that we're not going to have a lot of time for discussion. We really want to capture any of your ideas, comments, feedbacks or thoughts in the chat box. I wanted to also let you know that we are recording today because I know that there's many other providers who are keen to watch the presenters that we've got in today. To give you just a little bit of background, back in November, the State Emergency Relief Committee of WA actually requested WACOS to bring together a range of providers to look at ways that we could support the sector during the ending of the emergency measures, such as the evictions and rent increase moratorium. And this group started meeting, and they have two broad goals. One is to provide the sector with as much understanding and consistent understanding and tools and resources to support them to help navigate community members. And then the second piece is a strategic advocacy piece that we'll have Shelter leading that process, and they will provide you some information around that today and how you can get involved going further. I think that's from me. Each speaker is going to introduce the next speaker so that we can keep the flow. And without further ado, I'd really like to invite Michelle to take the platform and thank her for attending today as well.
Thanks, Leila. Hi, everyone. And I too would like to acknowledge that I'm meeting on Whadjuk Noongar country and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to thank WACOS for their leadership with this, and also the members of the working group. You know who you are, so hello. And just thrilled that there are around 100 people on this, so thrilled and a little bit daunted. So I've got the task of just providing a brief overview about what we know in terms of, I suppose, the housing issues around the moratorium lifting at the end of the month. I just wanted to talk through pre-COVID rental pressures, housing supply constraints and affordability. And I do have a PowerPoint presentation, and I've just realised I haven't loaded it on. So bear with me as I ask Chantel. Are you able to pull up the presentation, Chantel, or is it a bit of a nightmare and I'll just go without the presentation?
I might share it with Leila to share on the big screen, if that's okay, through admin.
Does that work, Leila, or a bit of a nightmare on screen? That's a technical term for those online.
Chantel, can you just send that through to socialpolicy@wacos.org.au, and Ashley will bring it up for us.
Okay, and so I don't delay, I'll commence now. So we do know pre-COVID that there was a lot of people living in rental stress. The Bankworks Curtin Economic Centre did a rental affordability report. And if you think about the housing market, there's around, say, 800,000 homes in WA, and a third of those homes are rented. And of the people that rent those homes, about 50% are on the lowest income bracket. A lot of those people would be eligible for social housing, but they're in the private rental market because they can't get a social home. And pre-COVID, we had about 50,000 people who are on the lowest income in rental stress, which means they'll pay more than 30% of their income on rent. And then if you think about the next income bracket, we had about 60,000 people on in rental stress. They too are paying more than 30% of their income income on rent. So before COVID hit, we had a bit of a rental crisis. We have that crisis because we have supply constraints in the market. Some independent research done by the University of New South Wales shows that in WA before COVID, we had a shortfall of about 40,000 social homes. So to meet need before COVID, we needed 40,000 social homes, and we had a shortfall of about 19,000 affordable homes. Because of that housing shortfall, in particular in the social end, we have people living in private rentals who are income eligible for social housing. The impact of that supply constraint is that we have over 30,000 people on the wait list for social housing. We have over 9,000 people experiencing homelessness, and as I said, about 100,000 people in rental stress. So the question is often asked, why do we not have the homes that we need? And there's a fantastic group called the Housing Industry Forecasting Group, and they produce 2 reports a year, and they forecast housing construction. And so one of the challenges we've got in WA is that for a whole lot of reasons, we haven't been building as many homes as we've built in the past. So for this year, they're expecting 18,500 new homes to be built. The average in WA is about 22,000 homes. So we're behind the 8 ball in terms of housing construction. Oh, thanks. I think the presentation's coming up. Next slide, please, Mr. Music. So I've gone through that. Thank you. Next slide. So this is the slide that I'm on at the moment. So we're not building up. So go back a slide. Sorry. Why no homes? Great. So we're not building as many homes as we've built in the past. And also what's happened is that with all of the federal stimulus measures, in particular going towards first home buyers, we've had a massive increase in terms of a demand for new lots and to build new homes for construction. So while we've got dwelling commencements and lots of approvals going through, the other issue has been that we haven't had enough lots to develop. And so we've got lots on the market at a 5-year low. And so while we've had absolute demand for new homes, there's a bit of a scramble now to get those lots to market so that we can build those homes. So there's a bit of a lag in terms of the demand even for new homes and the supply that we can get in WA. Also, we've got an historic low in terms of multi-residential commencements, and they're the sorts of homes that are generally infill homes or that are spread within the urban fabric, not on the fringe. And so because we've got a historic low, we're not getting those sorts of homes which tend to provide more diverse housing product. So we're not building as many homes. We're not building the right sorts of homes that people need in terms of diversity, and we don't have the land release available for those homes. So we're in a bit of a supply constraint at the moment. The other supply constraint is with all of this activity, we've got a bit of a trade shortage at the moment. So even if people are wanting to build, there's a bit of a delay in terms of getting access to tradies. So what the Housing Forecast Industry Group is projecting is that the new homes that have been stimulated with all of the COVID measures will not come to market until the latter part of this year. So in terms of the ability for supply to get a little bit more even out, it's not going to happen for months and months and months. So the situation we've got now in terms of supply constraints, we can predict will happen for the rest of this year. Thank you. Next slide. So back in November, this is what the Housing Industry Forecasting Group predicted, that our extraordinarily low rental vacancy rate signals strong consumer demand and a lack of supply. And because of COVID, more people were coming into WA from overseas. And also they found that more people were coming into Perth from the regions. So with that supply constraint, coupled with more people, we've got a bit of a perfect storm. Thanks. Next slide. The other thing that's happened is because of all of the stimulus package, most of the homes being built are for owner-occupier. So the number of new investor loans have decreased, and they're the loans that tend to be for homes that are then for rent. And so that's another reason why we've got this dreadful situation at the moment where we don't have enough rental homes. Thanks. Next slide. So because of the supply constraints, we've got a very tight rental market at the moment, and it's unable to respond to that increase in demand. Because the demand for rentals is strong and is outstripping supply, the prices are going up. And according to the Real Estate Institute of WA, rental listings are down to a 40-year low. So that's the current stage. And with the moratorium lifting at the end of this month, REWA have projected prices to increase by 20%, which is significant. And what we're also seeing is that the services who are getting calls from people saying, look, I'm really concerned about where I'm going to live. They cannot find housing options for people. Next slide, thanks. So this isn't my words. This is the words of the Housing Industry Forecasting Group back in November. They predicted that the lifting of the moratorium on residential tenancies is likely to drive high turnover and place significant upward pressure on median rents, 20% increase. And while some households may be led to consider home ownership, which is difficult given that we don't have the land available and it does take time to actually build homes. And we are seeing people who are purchasing already constructed homes, we're seeing the prices rise there. It poses a key risk to rental affordability, particularly for low-income households. And their solution was that they should apply for social housing assistance. Now, we know that there are 30,000 people on the wait list for social housing. So the question is, if you can't afford a private rental, or if you can't find a private rental that you can afford, and you're income eligible for social housing, the challenge is that social housing isn't available. So next slide, thanks. So the purpose of the forum today is to hear at the end of the forum about what we do need from government to act, because whilst we've heard the department and certainly ministers say they're not sure that there will be the concerns that we've raised will come to fruition, that there may not be a huge impact with the moratorium ending. Certainly that's not what we're hearing and seeing. And what evidence do we need apart from the kind of grunty stats to give to government to say, look, there is a rental crisis, we do need you to act. So Leila, that's me just giving a bit of an overview. I hope that hits the mark and that you're all excited about housing in the way that we are here at Shelter WA. Thank you. And I have to introduce the next speaker, and I'm going to ask Leila for a bit of a prompt who the next speaker is.
It's me, Michelle, Carmen.
Carmen. So I'm very thrilled to introduce Carmen Acosta from Circle Green, one of the all-time greats in terms of tenancy advocacy. Over to you, Carmen. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Michelle. I too, before we start, would like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Whadjuk Noongar land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Michelle has laid out what we're currently looking at, and of course today is about really coming together and brainstorming what more we can do. My job today is to highlight the importance of community legal centres, particularly at the moment. So with the end of the moratorium and the JobKeeper, both on the 28th of March, this will have repercussions across a number of different legal areas. And while the focus is today on tenancy, I need to highlight that those other areas of legal need are going to be employment, consumer credit, welfare rights, and a number of others. I'm very pleased to report that today amongst our participants, we've got many participants from the Community Legal Centre, including from our peak and many of the tenant advocates. It's also very likely that clients are going to be presenting with more than one legal issue and or complex issues. I'd like to just make sure that everyone is aware that there are 26 centres across WA, including regional and remote, that we have got 6 Aboriginal family legal services, and that specialists such as Circle Green Community Legal are dealing with matters such as tenancy, employment, migration. They provide a statewide service, access to legal advice over the phone. Other specialist centres, including welfare rights and advocacy, consumer credit, women's and youth legal services are all really important. So when you're thinking about your clients at the moment and those needs, please make sure, as I'm sure you are, that this is broader than tenancy. There is going to be a lot of legal need, particularly at the end of this moratorium. It's also important to note that Michelle's so right. We don't know exactly what the impact is going to be. We know already that across our services, we have received an increase in the type of calls that we're getting, and also an increase in the number of calls and how far in advance we are booked in. But I also know that it is important to highlight the fact that there are a number of community legal services out there that you can access. 16 of those centres do have tenancy lawyers and or advocates, and all of the generalist services will provide assistance in a number of areas of law. There is eligibility criteria, most of it surrounding income, but again, highlighting the fact that for all tenants, all are eligible regardless of income. There's two websites that I want to highlight, one of them being the Community Legal WA website, which will have a list of all of the CLCs, but I'm sure that this can also be sent around to all of the listeners today. The Circle Green Community Legal website contains relevant resources, particularly focused on the end of the moratorium, and also has a list of all of the tenant advocates available across the state. Importantly, and some of you may not know, we do have at Circle Green Community Legal a community hotline, which provides access to a tenancy solicitor for community support workers working with tenants. All they need to do is call the Circle Green administration number, and I will place that on the chat line in just a few moments when I finish. As I said, what we've witnessed thus far is that increase in call and the problem types. It won't be any new news to yourselves around the tenancy. It's mainly around agreements coming to an end, not being offered another lease, evictions, and the fallout of the rental increases. As Michelle said, it's up to 20%. The biggest issue is, of course, we're talking about a cohort who have an inability to rent elsewhere, even if there were rental properties available. Across the employment space, the end of the wage subsidy means that we're mainly dealing with employer insolvency issues, which is resulting in workers either not being paid appropriately, breaches in contract, redundancy and redeployment queries and dismissals. And just to highlight, we're booked something like 4 to 5 weeks in advance in that employment space. So that's it for me. I think we're right on time, Layla, and I'm going to hand over now to Melanie Avery from the Financial Counsellors Association of WA. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carmen. I would also just like to take a moment to acknowledge that we're meeting on Whadjuk Noongar country and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to thank WACOS and the group for all their really hard work in the background, and particularly acknowledge in the financial counselling world my colleague Di Hayes and Celia Duffel from the Financial Counselling Network, who have been the go-to on this. So obviously financial counselling is going to be playing quite a large role in the mix, and I think we can't understate that intersection between what the work that's going to be done with financial counsellors and the tenancy advocates. So I was asked just to speak briefly and around what's going to be happening and the resources that are being provided and the training that has happened for financial counselling. As has been mentioned, the work with the community legal services is really important and ongoing. And lots of the community legal services, or quite a few of them, also have financial counsellors in situ, which is great. So the financial counsellors will be working closely with Circle Green and trying to get that advice and advocacy. It's also the note that there is lots of resources out there, and the matrix or a table has been provided and will be circulated to all financial counsellors that really offers them a really good flowchart and good options of where to go to and what to do depending on the scenario that they might be facing. So Leila, I'm not sure when that is going to get distributed. I thought it had been, but is that going to be distributed soon to financial counsellors and the sector?
Thanks, Mel. I think that's a really good point to raise, and I'm noticing that we actually have more time than we thought, so I can take this time and update you about that. Okay, so thanks to our financial counselling colleagues and all of the colleagues on this group, we were able to put together a decision matrix that is pitched for financial counsellors. And then that decision matrix can then actually be adapted for tenant workers, for emergency relief workers, and I'm working again with my colleagues to adapt those. What we want today is to hear from you guys through the chat function. If we don't get to hear your voice, we really want to hear about what it is we're not answering, what questions you have. Perhaps there are additional resources we're not aware of. We're going to take all of this feedback and we're going to make sure that they're included, that the relevant bits are included in that matrix and those other sector matrices as we send them out. And we're hoping to do that early mid next week.
Okay. Thanks, Leila. We also provided the financial counselling with updated training from Trish Blake, who's the Director of Retail Services at Demas. And my colleague Leanne Bernard, you could talk more to that training and what was said on the residential relief grant.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Like Mel said, and I think this was the same offering that was through Circle Green as well. They also had Trish Blake present. So we've got a copy of that presentation that really highlights the key areas of the rent relief grant scheme and what financial hardship looks like and the criteria of the grant. So I really strongly encourage people to refer to that that document to get a really good understanding of the grant. It's very good resource. Also with that, Trish shared some fact sheets and links from their website, which talks about rent increases and other key areas or issues that we'll actually see going forward over the next couple of months. And it really gives a good understanding of the support areas also involved. So further on from what Mel said, I think highlighting that, there's a lot of sectors that are impacted, like the tenancy advocates, also housing support workers, financial counsellors, having an understanding that everyone's going to be under pressure during this time. Hopefully going forward, we would be able to do maybe some information sessions together as different sectors, pulling everyone together and seeing what our findings are and seeing, smoother work processes to refer together or work together and collaborate earlier. Also bearing in mind that our financial counsellors throughout WA do work under different circumstances and environments. Some will have tenancy advocates in their agencies, some don't. So also really supporting those services and having an understanding that there are housing support workers and tenancy advocates, and there is that hotline that Carmen mentioned, and the community legal services. I've stolen Mel's thunder here, but we've been looking at the community legal services and reaching out to actually see their uniqueness and what areas of law they actually cover, and forming a directory there so financial counsellors can actually see those services that can assist. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. And I shared in the chat the link that Trish provided, and on there is some really great, as Leanne mentioned, some really great fact sheets and also some really useful flowcharts for different options that clients might find themselves in that can be helpful for financial counsellors, of course, but also others. I suppose the big push is around what Carmen was saying, is financial counselling can be a really good start. And part of that financial counselling will be to assess all the legal issues and make sure that that client's getting appropriate help. So please make sure that clients are getting that advice to see a financial counsellor or to contact community legal service and get involved with the tenants advocacy as soon as possible. So early intervention is really helpful. Okay, I just wanted to double check in with Celia because I know she was heavily involved in this, just wanted to make sure she didn't have anything to add, but also mindful I don't want to put her on the spot. So Celia.
Hi. Look, not really, you covered it really well. The only thing I would add there is we are looking at directing individuals that have housing insecurity to register online with Home Hub. Leila, is that the right time to talk about that now?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have some time and flexibility. So, and we can revisit this if we've got any time at the end. It would be great to hear from people regarding their questions, but go for it.
Fantastic. So look, when we pulled this together, we were really cognizant on the fact that there are going to be different types of people falling into this housing stress. So the first lot will be those that are in arrears or have some degree of inability to meet their new rent level. If they are eligible for the rental relief grant program, it is really important that that's the first point of call, so that anyone who is seeing these clients refer them through to that program up until the end of the emergency period, which is in the 30th of June. If they're not eligible, that's when there are other mechanisms. We need to look at emergency relief and other supports there. Obviously recognising that we really want to make sure if we're using that emergency relief, we are ensuring that they're going to be gaining some ongoing security of tenancy. The next kind of cohort of individuals that we'll be seeing are those that are actually facing eviction. And that's what we're really worried about with what Michelle was talking around in terms of the housing, the availability of housing and the ability of these individuals to actually secure new homes when they're being evicted from their property for whatever reason that is. And I think Michelle got it right when she said, what do we need to do for the government to act? And that's really something that the working group has really been focusing on, because we feel this frustration. We know that there's this looming issue and we want to make sure that the government gets that information to be able to act on it. So we've been thinking about this a little bit, and certainly the advocacy is looking at doing something, and I'm sure someone will be talking about that later on. But one of the other things we're looking at is utilising an existing website that has been set up called Home Hub, which is around affordable housing and connecting people who are needing affordable housing to existing affordable housing that's out there. They actually have a registration form, and what we're going to be doing is evolving that registration form to enable us to direct those facing insecure housing to actually register their details. And that then will be able to not only get us an understanding of the prioritisation and the individuals that are being impacted, but enable us to actually utilise that data as well to feed into some of the advocacy. So if you are seeing people in that position, I just encourage you to actually refer them through. You can help them register on that website, or they can absolutely go in and register themselves. And there is a process beyond and a database behind that they'll be getting some information from Home Hub, which will actually also be useful. Other than that, yeah, just to reiterate from a financial counselling perspective, work with, we know that tenant advocates are not going to have, they're already booked up 2 weeks in advance. As Carmen was saying, there are limited, so financial counsellors, if you don't already do some of that work and supporting tenants through that, then reach out, get some additional training. As Carmen said, that community services helpline is going to be critically important if you haven't done that work before, but you're finding there's nowhere to refer your clients through when they need that tenancy support. So please utilise the resources that Circle Green have available for you. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Celia. Really appreciate all your work on this. I believe that's probably enough from us for now. Shall we move along? I am introducing Philippa, Philippa works for Anglicare WA, passionate about social justice and community services. So are you there, Philippa?
Hi, it's Daisy from Red Cross. Philippa actually can't make the meeting today, so she has asked me to step in on her behalf. No, you're okay. So speaking on behalf of Philippa, but from a Red Cross perspective. So I'm here to talk about tenancy support today. Before I start, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, and my respect to elders past, present and emerging. So we're talking about tenancy support services. This is a support service that assists individuals who are at risk of eviction and in the private rental market. There are currently 4 programme areas that cover private tenancy support. So Red Cross covers the Northwest Corridor, Centrecare covers the Northeast Corridor, RIRA cover the Southeast, and Anglicare cover the Southwest. We all offer a similar programme, and that is offering a strengths-based service to clients at risk of eviction, whether that be individuals or families, and assist them to stabilise their existing tenancies. We do that through referrals, life skill development, assisting them to access and participate in things like education, employment and training. And as I say, we do that in the Northern Corridor, but a similar service is provided across the whole of the metropolitan region. The idea with private tenancy support is that it is to maintain and sustain existing tenancies. Now, obviously, in the current climate, that will be more challenging. And so some of the other areas that we do work in is supporting somebody to locate more affordable or more suitable accommodation as well. So whether that being able to access social housing or indeed find another private rental accommodation option, that's some of the work that tenancy support officers can assist with. So private tenancy support is a wraparound long-term case management programme, and so we're funded to provide support for around the 4-month mark. There is flexibility in that support option, so it can be shorter if the needs are easier to address, and it can be for as long as the tenant needs if the support options are more complex. We also support individuals in community housing, so where somebody is at risk of their community housing, we're able to do the same services. And that is, as we've touched on, things like linking somebody into employment. Financial counselling is a huge part of the work that we do, ensuring that people understand and manage their budgets effectively, linking them in with education options, but also advocating for our tenants. So working with the landlord and the real estate agents directly, understanding what the reason for eviction may be. Previously, this would often be purely due to rent arrears, although now we obviously are coming across clients who have been able to maintain their tenancy for a long period of time, don't have arrears in place, have actually been model tenants but are being evicted so that an increase in rent can be sought. Some of our work is around educating real estate agents and landlords around the impact that that eviction may have, and also trying to secure additional timeframes. So if somebody is going to be evicted, we can at least stagger some of those eviction timeframes for our clients so we can then locate alternative housing for them. We're currently working towards a no wrong door policy for the tenancy support services that are in existence. So obviously, with it being provided by 4 service providers effectively, we've actually come together and in the last couple of weeks really started to look at what can that no wrong door approach be. So whether you are a tenant in the Northern Corridor but you access a tenancy support service in the Southwest, or whether you're a client in Rockingham and you make contact with Centrecare, what we're looking to try and do is actually have a one-stop shop for tenancy support options. That means that the person, whoever the first point of contact is, will be able to tell their story once. That agency will take the intake form and the relevant information around that person's situation. They will be the person responsible referring it through to the correct private tenancy support service, meaning that that person will get wraparound clear care from the moment that they touch base with an agency, rather than historically what may have happened is having to then retell your story to the agency in your correct area. So that's something that we're working across at the moment, and we will provide more information on how that will physically work in the future. We also link into other housing providers that may offer similar services to the private tenancy support service, agencies that provide services such as assistance with care and housing, Housing, who do a very similar service to private tenancy support, but work with older adults at risk of homelessness or are indeed homeless. So there are inter-referrals that take place there. And just recently, PTSS in Red Cross has been developing some really useful handbooks and information guides just to help support some of those tenant processes, acknowledging that we may not be able to support with wraparound care every tenant that is in need of assistance. We've created the tenant and real estate handbooks, which are available to access, and we can send that information out to everyone. And we've actually just created an alternative housing pathway information guide, which is looking at alternative options for those that are unable to secure long-term private rentals. And again, we're able to provide that information to anyone that may be interested. That's it from me. I'm not sure if anyone has any direct questions or if there's anything anyone would like to ask, but if not, I will be linking through to Esther Deng, who is going to be discussing emergency relief and ineligibility.
Hi everyone, I'm Esther from CARAD, Centre for Asylum Seekers, Refugees and Detainees. We work predominantly with people seeking asylum who are on bridging visas. The majority of them have no income whatsoever and are not eligible for any government supported welfare financial safety net. So obviously 6 months ago, with this point looming, we were really concerned about their ability, if they were to fall into homelessness, how they would be able to attain any secure housing and also to maintain it, knowing that it was likely that rental prices would increase. The majority of these people, if they do have work rights, some of them might find some work, but often they aren't able to earn enough to support their basic needs, including their rental costs. And also there are some who don't have work rights at all. So there's just no ability to earn at all. So they rely entirely upon charitable support from the community, from the not-for-profit sector, to be able to afford and maintain their housing. So it does make it challenging when there are various eligibility criteria around Centrelink, reference number, healthcare card, or even things like having, I think one of the recent ones that came through was around the ability to work, and I think maybe that's related to paying taxes, I'm unsure. That was eligibility criteria to access emergency relief. So once you kind of whittle all of those options away, there's very, very few, less than 5 organisations that we're aware of that can assist this group of people with emergency relief. So it is really difficult and challenging, and as you know, everybody's been discussing, the rental prices increasing, the the amount of housing available decreasing. It puts this already extremely vulnerable group of people into a more vulnerable position. And to complicate matters further, a lot of them don't have access to valid photo ID. So if they do move into the need for crisis accommodation, that becomes another challenge that needs navigation and support. So it is really difficult. We have raised eligibility for community housing with Department of Communities. However, there is some, I think, misunderstanding or maybe uncertainty around the eligibility. There is certainly information in their eligibility framework that includes people seeking asylum, but in practice we see very few, like maybe 1 or 2 people being able to access community housing amongst the whole cohort. I also know on the other end, the incoming humanitarian entrants that Red Cross work with will also be in need of housing. Maybe Lisa, who's on the in the meeting, might have some comments to mention there about them in more specific detail. But if anyone has any questions or any additional comments, we certainly welcome them. Lisa, did you want to say a few words?
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa from Migration Support Programs in the Red Cross. Esther, I'll quote my dad, as usual, you have said it all. You gave such a comprehensive overview, so I think there's probably not all that much that I can add. Just to say though that the Red Cross is also experiencing a lot of housing stress amongst temporary visa holders who are not in the uncertain visa category. So people who are on international student visas and spousal visas, people experiencing domestic violence and without access to safe and affordable housing, and then difficulties with accessing refuges if the client doesn't have access to income support. At the Red Cross, through our emergency relief program, we are able to provide people with emergency payments, but we are unable to refer to it, think of it, or treat it as income support. And therefore, it's very difficult to get people into any form of emergency accommodation if there is an income support element attached to that accommodation. So we're definitely seeing that housing stress. It's not just unique to the clients that CARAD and the Red Cross share, but also people on any kind of temporary visa. Having asked my team regularly what proportion of our existing clients are experiencing housing stress, they very quickly say pretty much all of them, and a minimum of 80% of them are experiencing housing stress. And just to give you an assessment of how many that would be, we only at the moment have between about 8 and 12% of our clients are the clients that CARAD sees. The rest are on different temporary visas. So that gives you an idea of how many people are still experiencing housing stress. I think that's it, unless people have specific questions.
Okay, thanks so much, Lisa. If there's no other questions or comments in relation to this area, I'll pass it back to Michelle, who I think will lead some of the discussion with Chantel.
Hi, everybody. Oh, sorry, Michelle. I was just going to go. We're actually going to do a bit of a detour and pass to Hadassah, who also has something, a piece of this puzzle that I think everyone's going to find really interesting. Hadassah?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Hadassah Morrissey from Anglicare and Financial Counselling Network. Just wanted to spend about a minute just sharing a partnership that we're currently establishing with the Department of Mines Industry Regulation and Safety through their conciliation and rent relief scheme. So before I do that, I would also like to share my acknowledgement of the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of this land. So a few weeks ago, the rent relief, so the residential rent relief team and the DMIRS conciliators communicated with us about their significant concerns about the complex social and emotional issues raised by their tenants and applicants that were applying for the grant. And also obviously our shared concern around the escalating issues of the rental stress. So in collaboration with the rent relief team and DMIRS, Anglicare has established a connection with their team with the aim of promoting or facilitating an improved social and emotional support offered to those tenants that are currently either waiting for conciliation or have submitted an application and are not currently linked in with existing community supports. So what we've done with Anglicare is we have mobilised a number of key personnel into the DMIRS office in the city to support what we would call a person-centric referral process. So whereby staff who have identified their clients or tenants with co-occurring issues, we'll be able to refer them to these staff members who will provide the support to those tenants in an immediate case management style. So we would assess what their immediate needs are and identify community support such as legal, housing, financial counselling, emergency relief, etc. So currently, leading on from what Daisy was also alluding to earlier, Anglicare is collaborating with the 4 private tenancy support agencies, which has started the last week or so, with the intent of providing a holistic and responsive service. In a similar way, we're also collaborating with the Financial Counselling Network and also the wider financial counselling sector to have a similar responsive service to people who need financial counselling. This is a very evolving project, so it has arisen out of the need for staff in the DMIRS program to be able to provide a responsive support service to those waiting for rent relief service. If you'd like to know more about this, please let us know, and I can also answer questions when the opportunity arises. Thank you.
Thanks, Hadasha. That's really exciting. It's a really great initiative, and one of the things I always notice about this sector is when we're thrown lemons, we make lemonade. And I imagine that some of the work we do in this moratorium period is going to have long-lasting impacts for the community and for the sector. So we've had a lot of conversations regarding what opportunities and tools and resources are available to support people with housing stress. And I'm sure that you all, as much as I and everyone else in this group, are really keen to talk about how we can coordinate to put pressure on government and anyone else we need to in order to get some responses that are actually going to really alleviate the stress that people are experiencing. And with that context, we're going to shift gears and we're actually going to go to Michelle and Chantel from Shelter, who is going to talk us through some ideas around an advocacy plan going forward.
Hi everyone, it's an honour to be here with you today, and I would also like to acknowledge that we're on the land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. Sovereignty was never ceded, and I pay my deep respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I'm going to share my screen with you now and run through our advocacy ideas. Hopefully this will work if I just click that onto full screen. Can everyone see that okay? Put your thumbs up if you can. Yes, great. Okay, so I wanted to cover 4 things today that I've been really excited to work on with Michelle and the team here at Shelter, and more broadly the Unlock Housing members. And these are 4 things that we were thinking of for our advocacy plan. So what I want to cover today, the first is sharing stories from renters. The second is measuring the impact of the moratorium lifting. So what are you seeing in the sector and how can you measure that? The third is an emergency roundtable and an emergency summit that we're organising. That's really exciting. And the fourth is to talk about, well, what is next with the Unlock Housing campaign? So sharing stories, we would all know how important this is, and for the first time in a really long time, or the first time I've ever experienced, housing is literally on the front page and has been covered by all TV stations. We're seeing so many stories of how bad it is out there for renters. We have this massive crisis, but also massive attention. And as a sector, this is something so important to keep the focus on and to use it to our advantage to get really amazing outcomes that we might not have ever had possible. Here's just some examples of regional front pages recently. And here's an example as well of this amazing story that we worked with Gail, a tenant who had contacted us in response to a social media post that we put out wanting to hear how people were being affected. Her story was broadcast on ABC, TV, radio, and online. So just incredible stories, and you're probably all hearing your own stories that you wish that you could share of your own clients. And so as a way to keep the momentum going and as a way to capture these stories, we wanted to offer you the opportunity to share something that would be empowering for clients and for renters to share online. And so this afternoon, Heather in our office is going to send out some collateral or some assets that we've made that you can post on social media and share in your newsletters that will encourage and empower people to share their stories. So these are some things that we'll be posting soon. And we're basically just saying to people, we're hearing from government that they don't think that the impact's going to be that big, but obviously we know that that's not the story. We're seeing horror stories every day. So we're asking people if they'd like to, if they've experienced either an eviction notice or a rent increase, would they like to share their story with the Unlock Housing campaign? And it will take them through to a really friendly feedback page, which also provides details for who to call for support. And it will also have the logos of everyone on the Unlock Housing campaign there, so that they can see that this is a united front. So we're really getting behind renters. And there's a couple of click boxes there to, on how much they're willing to share, whether they'd be happy to be contacted with media. So we just wanted to make sure in the working group we identified that stories are so important to capture. We want to do it respectfully, and we want to support people that are sharing their stories. So this is a way that makes it easier for you, if you want to share this on social media, so that we can capture that and work with you to share those stories and keep these, keep the amazing media focus and get outcomes. So that was something that we'd be really happy to share, and we'll do that this afternoon with you all. The second thing I wanted to talk about is really important. Another way of keeping this in the media, keeping the pressure on, and just knowing the size and scale of the problem is how are we going to measure the impact of the moratorium ending. So an idea that we had was a sector survey, and we want to make this basically as easy as possible for you to fill in. But the idea was that we would do a really short survey that we would send out to all of you on the impact you have seen as a service provider on the moratorium and rent increases, on the eviction moratorium and rent increases lifting. So the purpose is to capture those impacts and your evidence. We want to inform these, the roundtable and the summit that we're organising, which I'll tell you about in a sec. And we thought the best way to do this would be a really quick, just 5 or 10 minute survey monkey that we'll send out, and even set a reminder for you on 2 days to just fill in the details. Most of it is qualitative data, so it's just your observations, what kind of increase in calls you've been receiving, what kind of need is out there, and what you think would be the solution. And we can set a reminder, we can send out everyone a diary invite on those 2 days, the Tuesday the 30th of March, which will be just before our roundtable, and the Tuesday the 27th of April, which will be just before our summit, so that we can capture those data points at 2 times, just after the moratorium has lifted and a month in, so that we can then again use that to help our advocacy and make us strong and make us have a really powerful voice. So we're working with WACOS. WACOS have kindly offered resources to help prepare that and send that out, and we understand that that will be going out possibly tomorrow, but really soon, and it will be hopefully really easy for you to fill in. Here's a little sneak peek. And it's just a 5-minute survey on SurveyMonkey. So it'd be great if you're happy to do that, and also, happy to receive feedback, honestly, if it's not going to work. So the third thing is the emergency roundtable and rental summit that we are thinking would be a great way to advocate. So the emergency roundtable invites went out this week to about 25 of the really key people that we wanted to have at the table, just as a very quick way to bring industry and stakeholders together and our members together, to hear about what's happening out there, but also to provide a facilitated way where we could look at, well, what do we have in common? What do we need to achieve? What is urgent that we can put on the table as an action plan to government? Because we know they're desperate for it. So again, it's just seizing that opportunity to bring these voices together and develop an action plan together. So that is happening next Thursday, the 1st of April, and we can keep you in the loop on how that goes. We're going to develop a communique around that and an action plan, and it should be really exciting because we're going to host it with REWA as well. We've got government coming, so high-level decision makers coming, housing industry bodies coming. We've got housing providers and also service providers. So yeah, really exciting thing to be organising. And it will have a lot of impact, and again have a lot of media attention, and also power to government to deliver that action plan. The second thing which we'd love you as well to know about and even attend is the emergency summit. So this is the summit 1 month into the moratorium lifting. We're thinking that Wednesday the 28th of April. It's a far broader event than our roundtable. It's where we imagine we could have everyone from all of the sectors come and hear your stories, and set it up in a similar way to the roundtable though. So the first part of the morning would be to hear the stories, to look at the impact, to report, to provide a space to report on the data that we've collected from you all. So we really get the nature and scale of the problem, but then to again develop an action plan together and present that to government 1 month on. Finally, in terms of Unlock Housing, this incredible campaign that kicked off over the election period in case you weren't aware of it or hadn't seen it or wanted a bit more information about it, this is what a landing page looks like on our website. And this is how many amazing, incredible supporters we have, principal partners, and even industry on there. And it's growing, and it's just such an amazing show of strength. The industry and sector are really united on our beautiful campaign. We did a short, punchy platform, the orange document on the left. You can go onto Unlock Housing and have a look at the short policy platform that we're asking for. It's got 12 recommendations. They're costed. It covers the whole housing spectrum, and it's a really beautiful document. The purple document is a much more lengthy, detailed, really rich read for all of you housing nerds. So please read either of them. And then that's our 3 priorities there on the right-hand side: invest in social housing, fix the housing system, and end homelessness. This package will show the government how to do all of these things. And so we had a lot of success, a lot of coverage over the election period. So now we're thinking in the office and together with the Unlock Housing team, what do we do next? And we think that to focus on the first 100 days, what would we like to see the government deliver, and how can we work with the government in the first 100 days? Given that this is an emergency, given that they've stepped into an absolute crisis, we want to give them some priorities that we'd like to see in the first 100 days. And this is what they could look like. We'll be consulting and then putting these out. But this is what we are thinking they might look like. But after the roundtable, we could tweak them. But this is just stuff that is in our Unlock Housing platform already that we thought would be a beautiful mix that they could get cracking on right now to actually solve this rental supply side of the crisis. The residential Tenancies Act reform would provide certainty to renters if that was reformed, and if we actually had a really good crack at making that work for renters, not just landlords. And then a couple of ideas in there on innovative, fast ways to provide housing and to get it happening really quickly and be a bit of a lightning bolt. So they're our 5 ideas we have at the moment, but happy for feedback, and we'll keep you all in the loop about that, and would love to know your feedback as well about these advocacy plans and advocacy ideas. So that's me. If Michelle wants to say anything on the end of that, otherwise I will throw back to Leila.
Oh, thanks, Chantal. All-round superstar. I just wanted to add 2 things specifically in relation to the rental moratorium. I suppose the 2 strategies are keeping people in their homes. So that's where it's really, really important that we have the emergency relief funding, that we have support for the tenant advocates, and the residential relief grant scheme is fit for purpose. So we don't want anyone evicted, so we need to keep people in their homes. And then the second strategy is rapidly build the home. So if people, for whatever reason, can't stay in their rental home, that there's an alternative. And we do know it takes time to build homes. So that's where, you know, the beauty of what Chantal's put together is we know there's lazy land. We know modular construction can be a lot quicker and swifter. So let's build on the success of some of the modular products that are out there and rapidly build the homes that people need in partnership with the community housing sector. So also stop selling off government assets. So we know that the government does build homes for market sale. So if they just retain those homes for social housing, that would be fantastic. So those 2 strategies, keep people in their homes, rapidly provide affordable homes, is at the back of what we're pushing to government. And out of the rental summit next week, which we're doing with REWA, which I think is really important. You know, we're partnering with the Real Estate Institute of WA for a strategic reason. We hope that we can get some solutions that will give government the comfort that the industry and our sector support it and that they can act swiftly. So that's it from me. Thanks, Leila and Jenny and Chantal.
Thank you, and thank you to all of our presenters. And you guys have been so efficient that, in fact, we've given ourselves quite a bit of extra time. I am hoping that perhaps we could go to the sector, the broader sector now, and really take some questions or some comments. Or is there an issue that we haven't talked about that you would like to, while we've got these keen expert leaders in the room, it would be good to make use of them. So will we be able to see who's got their hand up or who wants to indicate? Ashley?
You have a question there in the chat box, Leela.
Okay. So would Malcolm like to ask Michelle that, or perhaps Michelle would just like to read it and then respond?
Hi, Malcolm. It's great that you're online. Given your fabulous knowledge as a worker within the Department of Communities, maybe you could ask the question. Are you there, Malcolm? So, okay, I'm happy to answer it. So the spot purchasing of the 2,000 properties is focused on current properties that are vacant. We do know from work done by the UDIA that there are currently across Perth are vacant apartments because of the way that taxes are in place to support people to develop. It's not advantageous for those developers to rent those properties. They actually need to sell the homes. So we're not talking about purchasing homes that are currently occupied. That would be ridiculous because it's not increasing supply. Malcolm, we're talking about purchasing the homes that are currently vacant. So absolute tragedy that we have people who are homeless, people in rental stress, and 1,700 vacant apartments today in Perth. So there's an opportunity, we think, for government to purchase those homes in partnership with the community housing sector. We provide a fantastic property and tenancy management support service. They can harness institutional investment, Commonwealth incentives, Commonwealth rent assistance, etc., etc., etc. So that we think is a really smart solution to increase supply now, while we rapidly get on and build using fabulous alternate technologies to increase supply in the medium term. So Malcolm, I'm not sure if you're still there, but that was the reason behind, and there's more information about that in the Unlock Housing document that Chantel referred to. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. I think that Malcolm was happy with that answer. Look, you know, we're all so well behaved today that really, if you've got something to say, just jump in and then, you know, let your colleagues say something if you both go in at the same time. But is Abacus here? Did you, Abacus, want to ask a question? So the question here is, where are the people being evicted on the 29th of March going to go who've been trying to be housed?
Yes. Hello, this is Debbie from West Oz Crisis and Welfare Services in Mandurah. We have seen, and we've been dealing with a lot of impending terminations, especially since October of last year. Been working closely with these clients, but come Monday, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of them who are going to be homeless. Not everybody has a family member or somebody that they can get support. There is no movement, especially here in the Peel region. There's a bottleneck for rentals. One of the real estates, although they manage 500 rentals, there's only 5 rentals that are available, and we're seeing 50 to 60 people applying for the one rental. So come Monday, it's great to hear all this information today. Come Monday, where are our people going to go? Any ideas would be great. And we can't have a tent city, obviously, but it is a great concern, and that's the biggest. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Debbie. I think that absolutely you're right, and it's almost the elephant in the room. And the conversations that I have with the sector is there is a realization that there are going to be increasing people who aren't able to get the assistance they need in the time that they need it. There is, and then, you know, you also have the secondary impacts of that onto how the sector and the workers going to cope while they're at the forefront of not being able to help people. I think there's a few pieces here. One is, of course, capturing the housing needs data, which is a second piece of work that this group is looking at, and that goes back to the discussion around Home Hub and being able to really get a clear understanding of how much housing is needed, the types and where. And then there's also a piece around emergency relief that we touched on with Esther and Liza, and more broadly that we're going to need to really monitor emergency relief spending and ensure that our funders have an understanding of how long that current amount of emergency relief is going to last. And then, of course, there is the emergency responses and advocacy that Shelter are leading. So although I don't have any answers for you right this moment, Deb, I can tell you that these are the exact issues that we have convened this forum for and will continue to work towards. I'm not sure if any of my other colleagues in that group have anything else they want to add. If not, we'll go straight over to Tracy Cascoli from St. Pat's. Did you want to add?
Yeah, thanks, Leah. Just a very quick thing on the topic of trying to collect this data and making sure that we are getting the messages through to government about the people that are struggling to find accommodation. I think if agencies across the board can just try that if they are encountering any people who have now been forced into the rough sleeping type of scenario or couch surfing, but particularly rough sleeping, if they can be ensuring that those people are somehow captured on the by name list that is that are currently being established. Is the one in Perth and Fremantle by name list is quite well recognised now by government and has been fed. The stats are being looked at very closely by government, and I know that Mandurah and Rockingham are developing their own, and so is Geraldton. So there's now going to be a number of by name lists around the place. And for those of you who are not sure what it is, it's just basically one giant long list of people who are rough sleeping or chronically homeless within the areas, and it does give an up-to-date number, and literally the government is not turning away from that because it really is by name people who are currently rough sleeping or chronically homeless. So I think if we can as a sector make sure that that is one of the mechanisms that we are using to capture that data, it's pretty powerful.
Thanks, Tracy. Does anyone want to add to the discussion around rough sleepers, the by name list? I know that that Ian from Home Hub, who's joined us, wants to share a few words.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Tracy. And I think there's a number of different referral pathways once people have told us that there's an issue and they need access to housing in some way. So people are coming from very different backgrounds. Some people are street homeless, some people are coming from unaffordable private rentals. So the key thing would be send them to one place. We can collect their housing need data, and then Home Hub will send them the information and the access to things like the by name list, the social housing wait list. We can start to navigate. So people tell us that they need access to housing, but we tell them where to go that's appropriate for their needs. So yeah, we don't want to miss people, but we also don't want to duplicate. So it's about making sure people are registering in the right places, so we can collect the right data and we're not duplicating.
Does anyone want to respond back to Ian? Michelle?
I just also for the tenant advocates and financial counsellors, etc. It's just really critical that you do refer people to the social housing wait list, and that people tick the box that they'd also be interested in community housing. What you're doing is sensational, Ian, but I don't think we should create something that doesn't also use that mechanism. It's very important, in particular because there's a priority list, and also that signals to government that there is a need for more social and affordable housing. So I wouldn't do Home Hub without also doing that standard referral to social housing.
Yeah, it's so important that people, so we collect the centralised data, but it's so important that people register for social housing, because otherwise you don't get the social housing need registered that is reflective in the community. So, and the worst case scenario is that you send them to the social housing wait list, but they're not eligible because they're $10 over income, and then they don't know where to go. So it's really important that you send them to Home Hub and you send them to the social housing wait list, because then the government is keeping a data capture for people that they think are eligible. And then we're also capturing the people who are also eligible, but also who aren't eligible. So we start to build an understanding of who needs housing, even outside of the social housing list, and inclusive of that. And we make sure that government has a really reflective social housing wait list.
Thanks, Ian. I'm also keen to hear from Ria. Ria poses an interesting concern or question around borders and lodges. And I'm just wondering if anyone has any additional thoughts around how, because my understanding is that borders and lodges, if there's a lease agreement, are protected, are eligible for the state rent relief program. However, yeah, I don't know if that's exactly what is going to assist the people in the context that you're talking about, Ria. Did you want to add to that?
Thanks, Leila. No, that it's all encompassing, really. There's that aspect to it, but also things like vacated tenant liability, just disputes in that regard, and also just protecting them from being evicted come the 30th. So yeah, that's pretty much all I meant by it. It's not really a question so much as a statement. So, but curious to hear other people's in this group thoughts. Yeah.
Has anyone got any thoughts or experiences around borders and lodges and the moratorium ending? Okay, you can always get back to us if you see that as an emerging issue. I'm just having a look at, does anybody feel free to jump in? I'm just having a look at the questions that have come up. I feel like there was something, but now I
there was an earlier question about the by name list. And so, which Ian, you did talk about. Oh, there we go. So NISA asked Tracy how to add to that list. Ian addressed that partially in your talk about Home Hub, but I wondered if Tracy actually wanted to elaborate on that.
I've got something too.
Yeah, I was just about to email NASA the information. So I think that probably the best would be to email. I'll put out the email address. The Zero Project is the backbone for our zero by name list in Perth, Fremantle area. But they'll also have the most relevant information for who's heading up the by name lists in the other areas. And they will, so basically each by name list, there's a number of agencies that have signed up already. And if your agency isn't one of those that is signed up, either there's the option of signing up, or there's the option of feeding that information into the agencies that are already signed up to get onto the list. But we'll probably be able to give you the most updated information. So I'll post that link onto that as soon as I can.
Thank you. There was a couple of conversations that I've had with different sector colleagues over the last couple of weeks, and one of them was around the importance of ensuring government follows through with the review of the Residential Tenancy Act. And so I said that I would raise that in this forum, and perhaps Shelter, Michelle might have something to say regarding that. And also get the idea from the sector whether that was something that you had been thinking about. Michelle, we're just talking about pressuring government to continue on with the Residential Tenancy Act reform that was started like 2019, I think it was.
Yes, we've got a commitment. Well, certainly the previous government had a commitment to do the tenancy reform. The challenge was COVID got in the way, but now we've got a new Minister for Commerce. We just need to find out what their agenda is, their legislative reform agenda, and we'd be certainly looking to Carmen and to work on that.
Yeah, awesome. I can share that and ensure that we get the opportunity to keep the sector updated as we go along. Another thing that's come up through the chat box is how we're responding to increases in rents that are going up incredibly, like depending on where you are, especially out in the regions. Does anyone have any particular experiences or shocking numbers that they wanted to share that we could use as a case study on how we might respond to these incidences? Ian, did you have something?
Yeah, I've got a really quick case where I was talking to a community development officer at a local council a couple of weeks ago, and she's a single parent of 3 kids, and she's having to move back in with her mum, and her kids are going to have to sleep in the grandma's living room because the rent's gone up by $180 a week in Ellenbrook, and she just can't afford that. And she's a community development officer at a local council developing community. So there's very real cases of everyday people that are at serious risk of homelessness and are victims of this moratorium rents, but also just the lack of alternative to the free market private rental system as well. So I think Shelter WA and Waycross and everyone else have a really great approach to capturing those stories as much as we can as a sector and trying to tell those stories in a very real way. So I'd urge everyone to try and use those centralised surveys, centralised housing needs registers. Let's get as many people registered, let's get as many stories, and let's start to, Peak Bodies do a great job of advocating, so let's give them the armoury to go and do that. Yes, Michelle, I think she would potentially. I can ask her.
Thanks, Michelle. And I think this has actually highlighted another really important critical dynamic within this situation, and that is that for many of our sector colleagues around the state, they are facing evictions and rent increases and a shortage of housing, and we really do need to ensure that we're able to collate the data around those workforce issues as well. Jen?
Oh yeah, look, I just want to pick up on Sonia's question in the chat. As we were taking complaints about real estate agents bullying or threatening tenants, and I would extend this consumer protection also taking those complaints as well. And does anyone know where is the best place to direct those tenants facing eviction to register their complaint?
Ala?
Hello. Yep, I actually have a personal experience. Just a few weeks ago, I had to reach out to Consumer Protection to get out of a house that was infested with mold. It was $620 in rent. It wasn't cheap. It was in a good area. But it took me, for myself as a caseworker, I'm helping my clients with the same issues, to reach out for someone to get out of the tenancy agreement, because the property manager was adamant, no, there's no problem with the house. I got a professional to inspect it for mold, and he actually said to me, you cannot stay in this place. Got a report, gave it to RIWA, gave it to Consumer Protection, but the house is again on open. They've increased the rent for $650, although he is aware of it, the property manager, that the house is uninhabitable. But this is how people are taking advantage, and I have to drive an hour because to move to my partner's father's house in Yanchep. So from Yanchep to Mirrabooka, and I don't think I'm going anywhere in the meantime. So I'm kind of homeless, but not. But so things are heading close to us. It's not just our clients.
Yeah.
So thank you for putting up.
Sorry. Thank you. And remember, we will be following up with a range of opportunities for you to input, share your story and your personal story and your data and your community service experiences. Did somebody do a call out because they wanted the floor? Danielle.
Yeah, hi, it's Danielle from Scales in Rockingham. I just wanted to answer your question in relation to complaints or if they are being bullied. Deemers certainly have a complaint online complaint system that they can put their complaints through to there, and I would encourage tenants to definitely do that. The other thing I wanted to bring up was what we're facing as tenant advocates is what we term as Section 64 terminations, and they are pretty much no ground terminations, and we are being inundated with these by landlords towards our tenants. And unfortunately, there's no real legal argument that we can put up in court in relation to these. So we are struggling to be able to, assist our clients to stay in their properties, because this is pretty much the option that the lessors are taking. So that's the one thing that, there's not a lot that we can do about it. It is the legislation and it is what it is. But I think one other area that I did want to mention is the government considering discussing capping the rentals, because as we know, they are increasing and it's just unbelievable, and it's something that needs to be put, you know, discussion needs to take place, and something does need to happen because our tenants cannot afford the increases. Right now, we haven't seen a lot of increases because the moratorium hasn't ended. As soon as it does end, we are, you know, I think are going to get inundated by, you know, the increases. So that's pretty much it. And I have to agree with Debbie from Abacus. An emergency, the government needs to consider where our families are going to be going, because majority, you know, on a daily basis, I am having parents or mums, tenants ring up saying, I've received Form 1C, notice of termination. I've got 21 days to vacate. I have applied for 20 houses and I have not even, you know, had any luck. And it's these people that it's just getting to the point where, you know, there's 100 people going and looking at one property, and our tenants aren't having any success. Where are they going to go? You know, it is getting to the point where they're saying to me, Danielle, I'm going to end up living in the car with my children, or they're going to have to get a tent. You know, so even if, I don't know, and a car park, something, an emergency place whereby they're at least safe to park for the night, something that needs to happen. I don't know.
Thanks, Danielle. And I do point that I can't remember who it was, one of our other colleagues here actually raised an evacuation centre type model for those families, and pointed at Masters in Bibra Lake being an absolutely huge, I mean, and just going back to Shelter's work, one of their advocacy points is the repurposing and utilisation of currently built, unused commercial buildings and other buildings. So
absolutely.
Michelle, did you just want to feed back to Danielle around the rent caps? Because my understanding is they'll take legislation. It's part of the residential tenancy reform.
So the residential tenancy reform isn't going to happen in the next month or two, but there's certainly short-term things that the government can do. Sorry, Hadassah, I've got a beagle. It's really hard to focus because he's so cute. I probably will pass over to Carmen in terms of the ability to do swift legislative reform, but we need a suite of measures. And what is really important is the stories that you're telling, not having them just disappear into the Zoom ether. That's what we need to capture, to say this is the problem and we're not making it up. And from that, we can then craft the solutions, whether it be rent caps, which may or may not be able to happen. If you think about car parks, safety, people, liability, risk, those sorts of things. So once we have the solutions and we've thought them through, we can present them to government, and that's the plan. So over to you, Carmen, about rent caps.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michelle. Look, I think that those next two pieces of advocacy are going to be absolutely vital. The survey, where we can gather some of these stories, most certainly the roundtable, and then the summit. And it's interesting because all of us here are singing from the same, singing the same tune, but we actually are already seeing these crisis points for our clients. And yet the government is still very clearly saying that they don't expect that it's going to be as bad as what we're proposing it will be. But Michelle is absolutely right. The review started in 2019. A lot of us around here, around this table, were very much involved in putting forward submissions. Tenancy WA, before the merger, as part of Circle Green, most certainly put in a very strong submission, as did the Make Renting Fair campaign, which was part of an alliance with a number of us also around this table. And the caps on rent are very much one of those points that we have put forward. But Michelle is also right, that's not going to happen overnight. That's not to say that the government or different departments could not make changes as speedily as they did under COVID or similar, based on the risks to our clients. So I think this is where we really do need to come together, come up with the stories, the evidence, the data to say, this is crisis point, what we're seeing, and being very, very strong in this next roundtable and summit, and making sure that we're not walking away without change. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmen. I'm just going to go to Lisa. I remember seeing her wanting to have the forum.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I just think that the issue of potentially opening up an evacuation centre is actually something that we should be considering really seriously, not only to address the needs of the clients, but strategically to put their needs in, make them visible. Both, I don't mean to say to exploit them in terms of the media, but it is interesting how much attention the tent city in Fremantle received. I think it's important to make sure that we don't, at the moment this problem is fairly invisible because we're talking about it as being an upcoming problem, but once it actually becomes visible and the evidence of it is actually at a football field somewhere, for example, then it's very, very hard to ignore. So I know that the Red Cross has a lot of experience being auxiliary to government in terms of setting up evacuation centres in times of crisis. Almost certainly this would qualify, and we would be very, very happy to have that conversation with anybody who wanted to participate if people agree.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Definitely something we need to explore. Now, I'm looking, we have 4 minutes left. I am definitely going to have us over and out before 2:30. Is there any, I think we've got time for 1 or 2 last questions or comments before we close up the forum. Is there anyone else? Raf says we need to declare a rental pandemic to pass laws quickly. I agree, Raf. Okay, unless there's anyone else, just jump in. No, okay. I'm now just going to spend a minute telling you guys where we go to from here. So as we've discussed, we have developed a flowchart decision matrix to support financial counsellors to navigate the various opportunities there are to support clients. I've actually today taken that resource and reframed it for an emergency relief provider to use. And I'm hoping that our colleagues at Circle Green will also have a look at it and consider, well, they probably don't need to because they actually have their own, being a legal community centre. Either way, there will be a range of tools and resources that we will send out to you, incorporating anything from today's conversation that needs to be incorporated. There's obviously a range of other documents and resources that will be sent out, including the Outlook calendar invite for 2 times to do the survey, amongst other things. But we will be looking to get them out to you. Obviously the survey next week, however, they may take some time to get, because as with all of you, all of the work that we're doing to coordinate this resource and this work is actually in addition to everything else we're doing. So be patient with us, and if there's anything that we can do to further help you, you can feel free to email me, and I'll put my email details in the chat. But big shout out and thank you to everybody who came, and especially to our presenters. Thank you.